Friends, how are you? Welcome to Changing Tracks. Today on board our train, we have a passenger all the way from Jacksonville, Florida. Welcome to our program, Mac. Now, I know you're a seminarian, but we'll get to that later on. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Christina. It's an honor to be here.
Mac, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, your childhood?
Sure, yeah. I was born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida. So that's the northeast part of Florida. In 1992, I grew up in a Catholic family. My father was from Cuba, and he came here when he was 4 years old, and my mom's from Quebec City in Canada, and she came here when she was about 10. So I'm actually a first-generation American. And I have one older brother. His name's Peter. He's about 4 years older than me. And growing up, we had a pretty good family life. We were a close-knit family, and grew up going to Catholic school.
As a child, do you remember having a relationship with God? Maybe like speaking to Him in prayer? I don't know. Like having a personal relationship where you spoke to Him every day?
So I would say as I grew up, we would definitely go to Mass every Sunday, and as I mentioned, I went to Catholic school. But at home, we didn't talk about the faith very much. It was just kind of something that we did on Sunday mornings, and despite that, my parents did teach me how to pray as I was growing up, and taught me to say some prayers before going to bed, just like the basics. And, an Our Father, Hail Mary, and a Glory Be, and maybe pray for those of us, like our friends and family, who were in need. But other than that, we really didn't talk about the faith much when I was growing up. So I just kind of looked at it as okay, it's the thing that we do on Sundays, and I pray before I go to bed. And that was probably about as deep as my faith went when I was in grade school and middle school. I tried to be a pretty good kid, and at that age, I didn't get into too much trouble or anything like that. Was a pretty well-behaved kid. So I guess my attitude towards God when I was maybe like a middle school age was like he's like this lawgiver. He gives us the rules so we can get to heaven. But at the same time, I looked at those rules as kind of like restricting us, like restricting me, and kind of like, all right, just follow these even if it's not fun, so just follow the rules, and then be able to go to heaven later on.
How did life continue? Did you have any plans for your life? Did God form part of those plans?
So I'd say that's kind of like the backdrop of my faith life as I was entering high school. Again, sort of just seeing God as like far removed. He's sort of the rule giver. Church is just something that we do on the weekends. And then as I went to high school, I'd say, that's kind of a time where I was like searching for my identity and who am I, it's kind of the age where you're trying to be sort of autonomous from mom and dad and like be my own person. So when I went to high school, I started playing football my freshman year of high school, and I really just threw myself into that and made football kind of like my identity, and being good at football. Like the better I am at football, kind of like the better person that I am and everything. And in a similar way, like being popular was another big part of my identity. The more friends that I have, the more well-known I am at school, and the better reputation I have, then kind of the better my life is and the better I am. And then towards the end of my freshman year of high school, I remember going to a party for the first time, like no parents there, a drinking party and everything. And that became another now part of my identity, is that I was like one of the cool kids who would go and go to these parties and drink and have a good time and everything. And so that kind of continued all through high school, this attitude where I'd say the three biggest parts of my identity of who I was were football, were partying, and being popular, and maybe girls as well.
What role did your friends play in your life?
Yeah, I'd say one of the things that really affected me in high school was that pretty much all of my friends were doing the same things that I was, and were living the same kind of lifestyle that I was. And it made me look at it because I was going to a Catholic high school, that's just the normal thing to do, that all the other Catholic kids going to our Catholic high school were all living the same way that I was. So I just viewed having this life of like going to parties all the time and having unchaste relationships. Any relationship that I had in high school, it was always kind of based on lust. And yeah, because all of my friends were really doing the same thing or similar things, that I just looked at that as like, oh, that's how people live. So we would still have, because we were going to Catholic school, we'd still have confession available. I think it was about once a semester. And so I remember I'd go to confession, and I knew that like the way I was living was sinful, and I would confess these things. And my attitude was kind of like, all right, yeah, I'm sorry. And I'll like hold out as long as I can. And then, as soon as I fell into any kind of sin, I figured, well, okay, now I can just sin as much as I want until we have confession again in 6 months or whatever. So there really wasn't any like, each time I was going to confession, there really wasn't like this firm, like kind of purpose to amend my life or to root out these sins. It was kind of just like, okay, I'll hold out as long as I can. And then, all right, once I fall, then I'll just keep living the same way. And again, it kind of all came from that attitude towards God, is like he's far removed from us, kind of like this image of God is like the old man with the beard, like far removed from us, and just gives us these rules. And so the farther I went in high school, and kind of like the more, or I guess the farther from God that I became in high school, the more I looked at our faith as just like this kind of imposing set of rules, and just looked at it as like a whole list of, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. Kind of like you just can't have any fun. And so I looked at like, oh, all the fun things are sinful, and really living a life for the Lord would be like this boring kind of life. I guess I pictured it as like being holy as like, oh, you have to be like a monk and, sitting there with your hands folded nicely and looking down all somber and just like praying all day and never talk to anybody.
How long did that last? Was it all through high school, or did you just go deeper and deeper into sin?
I would say during high school, I pretty much did go deeper and deeper into sin. And it got to the point, especially probably by junior and senior year, that, my friends and I would be out drinking and partying at least one night every weekend, if not 2 nights a weekend. And actually, so my parents had a lake house that was probably about an hour and a half or 2 hours from our house. And there'd be plenty of weekends where they'd say, hey, we're gonna go to the lake house this weekend, like wanting me to come. And I would always find little excuses. Oh, it's so-and-so's birthday this weekend, I can't go. And then each time that they would go out of town for the weekend, I would host parties at my house. And so, again, because I based my identity in part of it like just being popular and being kind of like looked up to as like the cool guy or whatever, that became a big area where I could kind of like exercise that, like, oh, I'm the guy that has the parties at my house all the time, like trying to be like Mr. Popular and the cool guy in that way. So I really just went like pretty much deeper and deeper into sin all throughout high school.
Was there any specific moment when you were in the party scene and deep into sin and you had an experience of God?
There was actually one time when I was in high school, I think it was my senior year, and we would go to adoration, and we had a little chapel there on the Bishop Kenny campus. And I don't remember if it was like once a month that we would have adoration or every few months, but I remember there was this one time in particular where I really felt the presence of God in a way that I had never felt before, and felt like completely loved in a way that I had never experienced before. And the Lord has this way of convicting us of our sin without like putting us down. So it's hard to explain until you have experienced it as well, that he does it like so gently. And so as I was having this, new experience of God's love for me, I also felt like how much of a sinner that I was, and not in the sense of like, I'm a terrible person, I'm so bad, like beating myself up, more of just like, I need to be better because he's so good. So I remember I even told my girlfriend, like, hey, we need to be chaste from now on. But that whole kind of experience ended up sort of being short-lived, because, I guess it's like the gospel story where Jesus talks about the seed being sown on the different paths, and there's one path that's the rocky ground where the seed springs up quickly and takes root, but then, it's scorched by the heat of the day. And that's kind of what happened to me, just got choked out and everything by the cares of the world and by, all the other ways that I was living and placing my identity in the football and the partying and girls.
After high school, did things take a turn? Was there ever a moment where your soul cried out sincerely to God to ask him for help?
So my freshman year of college, I was living with my brother at the time. So he was a senior, I was a freshman, and we were living in a house together and with a couple other guys. And yeah, I really just dove headfirst into the whole party scene, and made plenty of friends quickly that were all interested in the same thing, and started using drugs and going out almost. It got to the point where I was going out almost every night of the week, 5 or 6 nights a week. I was going out, sometimes every night. But what's interesting is that all during that freshman year of college, because I was living with my brother, we would still go to Mass pretty much every Sunday, because it had just been so ingrained in me that that's the kind of the bare minimum, and that it's a mortal sin to miss Mass. So I figured I could at least get that one covered if I just went to Mass on Sundays. And so the farther that year went along, it got to the point that just that hour a week of being in Mass was probably like the 1 hour a week that I was even a Christian anymore. I was kind of like a total heathen outside of there. And I guess, in high school and everything, I had always figured like, oh, I'm a pretty good person, I'm nice to people and stuff, even if I was still engrossed in all these other sins. But it really got to the point that during college, during that freshman year, that even like being a nice person almost kind of went away, and just got more and more selfish and like just consumed in my own, in myself. And so everything kind of came to a crescendo towards the end of my freshman year of college. So I went to a party, and I had driven there with a friend of mine. And at this party, I actually drank so much that I got to the point that I don't remember what happened. And sometime during the night, this friend wanted to go home, so I drove him home, and I don't even remember driving or anything. Somehow, by the grace of God, I get him home safely, and as I'm on my way back, I wrecked my truck into the guardrail on the interstate and totaled my truck. And again, by the grace of God, I had my seatbelt on because it was an old truck and my airbag didn't even go off, so I don't know what would have happened, right? So the first thing that I remember is everything's kind of dark, and I hear this big thud, and I open my eyes and I look around and I see, okay, I'm in my truck here, I'm on the side of the highway, and I'm freaking out. It was about 3 a.m. at that point. My phone was dead, there was nobody I could call. So I leave my truck there on the side of the road and went to the nearest exit, went to a gas station, tried calling my brother. At this point, it's probably 3:30 a.m, so no answer. And because my phone was dead, I didn't know anybody else's number by heart who lived there in Gainesville, so I was just kind of stuck. And so I leave that gas station, I'm walking down the side of the road trying to wave my hands at any car that's coming by to stop and just get some help. And at this point, I probably said the first like real prayer that I had said in, at least since high school. And I'm just like, God, get me out of this situation. I'll change my life completely, I promise. Just get me out of here. And so I'm still waving my hands out at any car that would come by. And so finally a car does stop, and it ends up being a cop. And so, he said that he could smell the alcohol on my breath and everything, and gave me the field sobriety test, which I failed. And so I get arrested and taken into jail. And because I was in a car accident, they kind of go through the precautions and take you to the hospital first. So go to the hospital first, and by the time I finally get booked into the jail cell, it was 10 a.m., and you're supposed to go in front of the judge at 9 a.m. So I had missed that window, and I had to sit in the jail cell for the whole day and the whole next night until the following morning, which ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. So I'm sitting in this kind of community jail cell. There's probably 15 bunks, all lining the sides of the wall. And I'm the first one in there. So different men start to come in throughout the day. And I was, 18 years old at the point. And everybody who's coming into the cell, they're all like, in their 30s, 40s, 50s. They've all been arrested like multiple times. And they're just treating it as like, one more to put on their tab. They're looking at it as like not a big deal at all. And I started to just think, like, I'm being treated, the same way these guys are. There was even one guy who was high on crystal meth who was in the cell with me. And so, the guards just treat you, like you have no dignity or worth at all. Like you're kind of like even below an animal, And so I'm starting to think, like, I'm being treated the same way these guys are. Is this really what I want my life to come to? And so I had this moment where I was like about to break down and cry. And then I'm thinking to myself, no, Mac, you're in a jail cell right now. You can't cry, like you'll get beat up or something. So I remember turning and facing the wall, and I said, all right, God, I'm tired of this life. From here on out, I want to live my life for you. I want to change my life completely. And so it had just so happened. So anyways, I go through the rest of the day and get picked up from the jail actually by my parents, which is like a terrible and kind of humbling experience. But it had just so happened that the day before getting arrested, I had run into this girl that I went to high school with. I hadn't seen her since high school, and we actually weren't even that close at school. But she texted me later that day saying, hey, it was good seeing you today. You should come to this Bible study that I'm in. And at the time, I said like, oh yeah, sure, I'll go, like not intending to go at all. But about 48 hours later, like she was one of the first people that I called after, getting out of the jail. And I started going to this Bible study, and I would meet with the leaders of it, sort of on the side, and kind of told them my situation and where I was, and that I wanted to really start living for the Lord. And they helped me to start getting like a regular prayer life and to start praying with scripture. And they really just took their time every week to meet with me, individually, and kind of walk with me and help me along. And I would say that definitely if I didn't have them, that little conversion experience in the jail cell would have just been like a flash in the pan. It would have been like this short-lived moment just because I was like guilty and panicking. But the fact that I had them to kind of keep me accountable, and that I could see in them, and then also the rest of the people in our Bible study, that I could see for the first time like kids my age who were really living out their faith and were just completely like full of joy and had such a genuine love for one another that I had never seen anywhere else. I had never seen it, in the friends I had made in college, even though we'd party and we'd have a good time together.
When you started going to the Bible study, how did your life change?
So I would say as I was seeing, these kids who are my age who are really living out the faith, and just like so happy and so joyful, I started to realize like, all right, this is possible. It's possible to really live like all in for the Lord and to be happy, and to have a good life. It's not all just about, following this set of rules and getting to heaven, that the Lord wants us to be happy here on earth too. So my whole life just kind of flipped. I started say no, to like the party scene more and more, and started to say yes to God and to kind of like this church community. Now there were times where like it would fall back into sin and everything. It wasn't like, I'd say even if my heart had taken like a 180-degree turn, kind of my actions didn't follow like immediately. There was some time where I'd say I was kind of like living a double life. Like I'd, get more involved with the church and everything and hang out with my church friends, but then I'd also go hang out with like my party friends too. And so that's kind of how my sophomore year of college rolled on. And then as I started my junior year, it was just kind of like this whole progression of getting closer and closer to the Lord. So I'd say especially the more I had a prayer life, the more I developed a prayer life, the more I realized just the emptiness of the life of sin and how much better it is to live for the Lord.
Did confession have a pivotal role in your conversion?
I'm glad you asked that. That's a huge part of the story that I was about to skip over. Thank you. So I'd say maybe, a few months after that conversion experience in the jail cell, eventually, I was finally like convicted enough to go to confession. And so when I finally went, it had probably been, I don't know, maybe like a year and a half since going to confession. This is the this is the beginning of my sophomore year in college, and it had been since high school, since I had gone to confession. But this time when I went, it was with, this conviction and this newfound like real and true like repentance and wanting to turn away from sin, which I had never really had before going to confession, my whole life. Maybe when I was a little kid I had that, but this was the first time as like an adult and like a more mature repentance. And I'll never forget that. It was, I had this conversion experience in the jail cell, which was more based on shame and feeling guilty. But this, going to confession and really laying it all out there was really the beginning of a conversion, of love and experiencing that mercy of God in just a totally new and unbelievable way, that I could dump all of this garbage that I had done and then I could just be totally cleansed and forgiven and not, like judged by the priest or like condemned by God, but set free. And I think that's the perfect way to describe it. Just was completely set free and started, a whole new life. And from that point on, it was like, anything that was going on at the church, any event or whatever, like I was there. I wanted to be there. And I started to go to Mass more and more often. So instead of just on Sundays, I would even go like maybe starting out like one time during the week or 2 times during the week. And that kept on increasing as well. And I would have these moments of receiving the Eucharist, of, again, like confession, of like kind of being overwhelmed by God. Also in the Eucharist, like being overwhelmed by just the love of God, and even sometimes like being moved to tears just by the presence of God in the Eucharist, that he would give himself to me there. And that kind of continued all through my time of college, of just falling more and more in love with the Lord.
When you started living in grace, did the Lord tell you what he wanted of you? How did that come about?
So as I was kind of deepening in my faith all through that time in college, I guess growing up, like I'd always wanted to get married and have a family, and just kind of assumed that's what I would do. I never thought about priesthood or anything like that. And there was one time where I was in Mass and the priest is giving the final blessing, and all of a sudden this thought comes out of nowhere, like, I could do that. And right away I was like, what? No, I don't want to do that at all. So I kind of tried to ignore it for a while, and as the weeks and the months went on, this thought, what about priesthood? What about priesthood? Just kept coming up. And it was almost like the more I tried to ignore it, the more that thought would come up. So eventually it got to the point where I said, I guess I have to really start praying about this and see, like, are these just random thoughts from my head, or is this actually God, calling me? And, talked to some priests about it, but asking them for advice, but like I would never tell any of my friends or my family that I was thinking about it because like I didn't want it to be true. My attitude was like, all right, I'll just kind of go through a time of discernment, like get these thoughts out of the way so I can pursue like a nice wife in peace. And so even as I'm, praying about that and discerning, like, is this really from God? I meet the girl of my dreams. And, we go on a couple dates and everything's going great. I'm like head over heels for this girl. And so I'm kind of making a long story short, like even as a couple months are going by, I'm still head over heels for this girl. But that thought about priesthood just will not go away. And so eventually, it got to the point where after like maybe 8-10 months of really wrestling with God, like, no, there's no way you could call me to this. There's no way I could be happy being a celibate. As the time went on, he kind of started to whittle away that fear more and more, and to help me to trust him that if he's calling me to something, that it's going to be like the best possible life I could ever ask for. So eventually, after kind of kicking and screaming for a long time, finally I said yes. And even that moment where I said yes to God, it was on a retreat, and I remember going into the adoration chapel, just getting on my knees and saying, all right, Lord, I'll do it. Right when I said that, it was like the most incredible peace that I've ever experienced in my life. And so even having to break things off with the girl who I was dating, like as hard as that peace was still there. And that peace has really remained since then. It's probably been, 6.5, 7 years since then. And that peace has remained. And even though not every day is easy, there's plenty of, struggles and challenges being in seminary. That peace kind of remains throughout. And I think that's the fruit of saying yes to God and doing God's will for his life, is that there's no better life, And as I look back on everything that he's done in my life, I'm like completely blown away and amazed at how he would, sometimes I'll even wake up like, I'm a seminarian? Like, Lord, you chose me? I'm gonna be a priest in 2 years? Like, are you sure you wanna do this? But the more I ask him, the more and more it's a resounding yes, So I'm just so thankful to God for everything that, that he's done to lead me to where I am today and to where we're going together.
Mac, thank you so much for your testimony. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for listening. God bless you.
Friends, it's so important to give thanks to God because he crossed our path and has shown us the plan that he has for us. That same plan that he has had since he placed us here on the earth. So give thanks to God, because many times we just ask, and we forget to give thanks. Thanks for joining us.